False narratives and lies being told about DeMar DeRozan and the Sacramento Kings. We're going to talk about what the truth is about whether or not you can actually win in the NBA with DeMar DeRozan on your roster. I'm Trevor Lane. This is the Basketball Bulletin. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. Only about 20% of you right now watching this video are subscribed. The other 80% are not. Do us a favor. Do yourselves a favor. Hit that subscribe button. We think you're going to enjoy the content that we've got coming. Joining me is Donnie Freeman, a.k.a. D-Free. Donnie, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. Hope you are as well. And DeMar on the Kings, not been going the way that they've been hoping so far this season, but I'm very hopeful still. And we're going to talk about that today.
Yeah, we're going to dive into the truth about the situation. First, quick shout out to our sponsor, and that is Prize Picks. If you use our code Bulletin, you get a guaranteed $50 on your first $5 play. Prize Picks is fantastic. A ton of fun. I always enjoy playing over on Prize Picks Daily Fantasy. We're going to make a few picks here for some of tonight's games real quick. Put together a little card. So I like, Donnie, when I'm looking at this, Steph Curry against Minnesota, 24.5 points. Minnesota's defense has definitely been really, really good, but I can't pick against Steph Curry. I have to hit more on this one. Are you in agreement there?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's an easy one. I think his scoring has been a little bit down this year, and that's where it's a little tricky, but I think he's going to get it.
Yeah, I agree. I think he will get it as well. Then let's go take a look. Oh, one of my favorites, Alperen Sengun. This is another one that is being, and by the way, I'm just looking at the often used plays here. Alperen Sengun, that's a lot of assists, 5.5 assists. I may steer clear of that. You know who I like? I like Norman Powell. He's been on heater lately. 21 points. The Rockets defense has been good, but I think Powell gets it.
Yeah, I think he gets that. I also like Sabonis. I think Sabonis is a good one there.
Ooh, especially against Utah.
Points, rebounds, assists. I think that's easy.
Okay, let's go with all those. So we're going to go with Norman Powell, Steph Curry, Doma, Sabonis, hitting the more side on all of those plays. If you guys want to get in on it, you can go check out Prize Picks. And Prize Picks, again, use that promo code Bulletin. They also have a great Picksmas free pick here. Patrick Mahomes coming up, his game on the 15th. If he gets one passing yard, it's a winner. So go check out Prize Picks. Great they do all kinds of great promos. I love Taco Tuesday. Go check out Prize Picks. Picksmas. It's a free play essentially. 0.5 passing yards, and you win there. Use our promo code Bulletin. That way they know that you came from us. All right, Donnie, let's get into DeMar DeRozan and the truth behind the situation. Here's what's going on. This is an article that came out, and I think this is the common thinking here with DeMar DeRozan. It's that you simply can't win a basketball game with DeRozan on your team. He does not play winning basketball, and I don't agree with that. Have you been hearing that as well? Is that something that you've noticed?
I haven't so much noticed that recently. I remember that kind of being one of the narratives with him where his teams weren't performing well in the playoffs earlier. And, he would have games where he basically no-showed, but you could maybe argue or explain away some of that as like the LeBron effect. Maybe he was just in that team's head. So maybe that's it, but I haven't heard it so much lately. I wanted to ask you to clarify, what is quote unquote winning basketball?
Well, I think winning basketball is simply, to me anyway, is the team better when he's on the floor? Is he helping? Because a guy may put up 25, 7, and 7, but if they're not efficient doing it, they're not doing it in a way that is conducive to their team's success, then they're kind of empty stats. And I think that's what DeRozan has been accused of. Now, part of it, and I think this is the quote from ESPN, his play hasn't driven winning. And it's something that unfortunately has been the case throughout his career, and it's part of why he's changed teams a bunch. So the funny thing about narratives is that once they get set, they are very hard to dispel, even when what that narrative is talking about is no longer factually correct, which I believe is what's happening here with DeMar DeRozan, saying that his play doesn't drive winning. And I think some of it, Donnie, has to do with the era that we live in right now. Where right now, DeRozan is great at the mid-range, but that's not what teams are emphasizing. Now it's all layups, it's all threes. That's what teams want, at the rim from three. And they want that because that's what the math says they should be doing. But DeRozan is a 52% mid-range shooter, 10 to 16 feet. And to me, Donnie, there's there's some artistry to that. And that is a weapon and an important thing to be able to do because defenses, no offenses are going for shots at the rim and threes. So that's what they try to take away. What they give up is the mid-range. If you can be really good at that and really efficient at that, then it's okay. We act as though mid-range shots are inherently bad. No, if you shoot them efficiently enough, they're not bad. And I think that's what DeMar DeRozan does.
Yeah, I think the problem is that a lot of people can't even get close to matching DeRozan's efficiency on those. So that's probably why for most people it's like, you might want to take just a few steps back and take that three instead, which is where DeRozan's kind of a weird case because he's never been able to put together the three despite being such a lethal shooter from basically everywhere else. So that being said, yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. And I do agree. I just wanted to clarify for the video on what a quote unquote winning player is, because I think that it's one of those things that depending on who you're talking about, you could maybe define it differently. Now, I do think that DeRozan's been better of late for the teams he's been playing for since the Toronto days. And I do think that if you're able to put him in a position where you've got spacers around him, where he's not distracting from your team with the spacing too much, then it's okay. But otherwise, I mean, he's a lethal scorer from basically anywhere else on the court. I'm not sure what else you would really want from him unless you start talking about other things like maybe some of the intangibles or defense or things like that. But in terms of pure offense, he's going to bring it, and he's going to also hit some big shots down the stretch for you.
Well, and here's what the advanced stats tell us. Here's what everything tells us about DeMar DeRozan as a basketball player. So this is exactly what's happened. It's plain as day. You can see it. This is what happened to DeMar DeRozan, and this is why people still think that you can't win basketball games with him. Look at this. There was a good chunk of his career where that was true, where his teams were worse this is his differential, on versus off. All the blue means he is a negative. Right? It means relative to his position, he's performing worse than his peers. Even though he's putting up good numbers, he's scoring the basketball, he's not doing it in a way that's conducive to winning. So for a while, that statement was a true statement, and we're talking years. And once those narratives get set, it's hard to dispel them. But look at what's happened over the last few years. The 21-22 season in Chicago. Since he went to Chicago, that has been 100% false. His teams have flat out been better with him on the floor, sometimes by a lot, plus 5.2 points per 100 possessions with DeRozan on the floor that first season in Chicago. Even right now, where people question whether the fit is kind of clunky in Sacramento, plus 1.4 per 100. They're better with him on the floor than with him off. But again, you've got a decade of DeRozan being a net negative when you get into the advanced metrics. And that just takes a long time to dispel, but it has not been true in the last few years.
Yeah, I think that the narrative thing is particularly just crazy because I see it a lot with guys that were perceived as not being a good defensive player earlier in their career, things like that, and where it's like, nah, this guy's actually at least, decent or average now. Or maybe the opposite is true. Somebody is not as good of a defender, but they still get credit for it later in their career where they are not as much of a good defensive player as they were earlier. And so that's where I see it a lot. But with DeRozan, yeah, as you see by the numbers here, those first few years or first decade, basically, until he left San Antonio was not great. Now, some of that could be explained away as some of the team construction, etc. And in Toronto, there were several years where he was either an all-star or they were pushing in the playoffs, things like that. And we're mainly talking about regular season at this point. But regardless, I think he kind of really came into his own as a scorer, things like that over the last handful of years, especially where he started hitting numbers that he hadn't really hit so much previously in his career. That first year in Chicago, he's been up 28 points per game, which is a career high for him.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why that team was so fun back then too, before the injuries took them away. But yeah, he's been awesome the last handful here.
Now you look at and this is why just a traditional box score doesn't always reveal anything. You go, oh, look at that. San Antonio, he's putting up 22 points, 5.5 boards, 5.6. It must be pretty good. He's pretty good, right? He must be helping your team win. And so once those narratives get set, and then you look down and you see, oh, well, he went up by. Most people don't. They're not going to pay a lot of attention to the guy went from a 22 point per game scorer to say a 25 point per game scorer. They're going to go, okay, the guy's a 20 plus point per game scorer, but it actually is a big difference when it comes to your team winning and losing. And so people won't recognize that, and they'll think, oh, it's still the same DeMar DeRozan. No, he's actually been really good. And here's where he's really helped the Sacramento Kings. The Kings were dead last year in free throw percentage. This was a team that didn't convert from the free throw line. DeMar DeRozan is a not just high percentage free throw shooter, but a high volume free throw shooter as well. So you go over and you look at DeRozan's stats here relative to his position. I think this is where he's really helped Sacramento. Relative to his position,
he's got
you look at DeMar DeRozan and free throw percentage, he's in the 70th percentile, but shots that he gets fouled on, 98th percentile. He is elite at getting to the free throw line. Elite. And he has changed the Kings' fortunes from the line. They are now a pretty solid free throw shooting team when we look at how they stack up compared to the rest of the league. He's definitely helped them out there. So, Donnie, I think DeMar DeRozan is a net positive. We can talk about playoff concerns and things like that, but that's something I think different. So why are they not winning more? What's the reason then that they're not winning more games? Because this team, I think, should be better. They're actually 5th in the NBA right now in free throw percentage. And yet...
Well, we did that whole deep dive and kind of came to the conclusion that there were a couple things plaguing this team. Part of it was Kevin Huerter has just been so bad. Keegan Murray's not, been playing the way that they would have expected. And then they also were getting shot out the gym with bad luck on some of those shots, basically, where players were just making those. So they're a team that should be better than they are. And the numbers say that they're better than they are. And that's going to normalize, I think, at some point, because there's not much of a reason otherwise as to why they're really struggling here. And there are other things, I guess you could say, like, they're a bit small. Maybe they need another big guy in there that they're consistently playing in their rotation. But I'm not sure that most of that falls on DeRozan.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It does not. The problem is DeRozan is the biggest name. And so he's the one and he's the new piece, right, going in. Yep. Kevin Huerter was around last year. DeRozan is the new name. Keegan Murray's so you see this Kings team that's struggling a little bit, and you think, oh, why are they struggling? Oh, something must have changed. Oh, it must be DeMar DeRozan's fault. It simply has to be. He's the big name. He's the one everybody's going to pay attention to. But in actuality, when you stop and look, they've been better with DeMar DeRozan on the floor. But what has happened? Well, two guys, Kevin Huerter and, unfortunately, Keegan Murray have really struggled behind the arc. That's been a big, big problem. So if we go and we plug in DeMar DeRozan on the court, Kevin Huerter off the court, look at that. Plus 6.1 points per 100 possessions. They're winning fairly handily. I love this lineup. Not defensively, but look at the offense. Even with Keegan Murray out there on the floor. De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk, DeRozan, Keegan Murray, Sabonis. Look at that. Plus 11.9 points per 100. This one, small sample size, 100 possessions, but plus 25 with DeRozan at the 3 and Keon Ellis in there at the 2 and the defense that he provides. It's not DeMar DeRozan that's preventing the Kings from getting where they want to go. He has not been the problem. In fact, they have been better flat out with him on the floor. It's the guys around him. They're just not as big of names as DeMar DeRozan. So it's too easy to just point the finger at DeMar DeRozan and say it's his fault why the Kings aren't winning more games. But you dig into the numbers, and it's simply not true.
Yeah, can we pull up a DeRozan off just to see how that looks like?
Absolutely.
Also, I thought that one that you pulled up just now was pretty interesting because the next lineup with Ellis in instead of Monk, it's basically, or Monk in instead of Fox, it's the exact same as that second used one. Also a heavy, heavy positive. So it's just, the way that they play with these guys, regardless, is pretty seamless.
So without DeRozan, the defense indeed gets better, but they're only +1 in point differential with DeRozan off the floor, and that's obviously credit to De'Aaron Fox, to Domantas Sabonis, to all of their guys. Plus 2.4 with DeRozan on the floor. It's not a huge difference, but he's making a difference out there. I'm curious to see Keegan Murray, who's not shot the ball well, but I know they need his role. I'm curious to see what he does if he's off the court. So they actually go down, even with Keegan Murray's poor shooting. They just need the size on the wing, I think.
Yeah.
But
and
Kevin Huerter,
right?
What's that?
I said in the threat of somebody that's going to be able to knock it down historically anyway, despite him not really being able to do it here. While we're on the topic of DeRozan, I wanted to also, it's a little bit different, but I still wanted to show the playoff numbers as well, just to see just to show that as part of context that we have here.
Sure. Yeah. In the playoffs, DeRozan has not been nearly as effective. And that's where part of the narrative comes in. It'll take me a second to pull that up.
Yeah.
but that's where part of the narrative comes in that DeRozan has not been good. It's been the playoffs with him. So
Mhm.
that's an area that he has indeed struggled and continued to struggle. Although that's a little bit weird as I'm pulling up these numbers. As a mid-range shooter, you would think that's the shot that's going to be more available come playoff time. So I'm a little
Mhm.
bit surprised when I do dig in and see his numbers include the playoffs, why he's struggled there.
Yeah, over the top shot making is extremely valuable in any game, but especially in the playoffs where things kind of slow down, things like that. And he's good at that. Also, getting to the line is less available, but he's still good at that too. So, kind of weird that his game doesn't translate or hasn't historically translated the best to the playoffs. Maybe it's got something to do with that usage rate because my God,
Yeah, right.
100th percentile. But yeah.
His points per shot attempt. Look at this with Toronto in the 15-16 playoffs went
Oof.
from the 66th percentile to the 14th. With Toronto again, went from the 64th percentile to the 23rd. We go look here with Chicago, the 21-22 playoffs. Again, he was good that season. 86th
Ooh.
percentile points per shot attempt, which is elite. 4th percentile during that playoff run. He's just not been able to get it done in the postseason. But we're not talking postseason right now. I mean, we're talking about, are the Kings better off with DeMar DeRozan or not? Right now, everything says that they are. And in fact, a simple tweak with either hoping Kevin Huerter comes back to form or subbing in Malik Monk or Keon Ellis and just relying on them more heavily for minutes seems like that would fix a lot of what's going on with Sacramento rather than placing all this blame on DDR.
Yeah, I don't think he's, regardless of any of this stuff, I don't think he's their issue, especially not their main issue. I just think that they've been unlucky, and I think that'll rebound. At this point, maybe they're going to wind up being closer to a 500 team, maybe 46 or so, is what I'm probably projecting for them. But that's not so bad. I think that they can probably make it in and also give some team a tough out in the first round potentially. And I think DeRozan will come up big for them at some point as they try to make that push.
Yeah, you look at plus 1.5 points per 100 possessions. There's still a positive in their point differential. Normally, that will average out as the season goes on. I think there's been a bit of bad luck here so far with Sacramento, and I think it's just too easy to point the finger at DeRozan without actually doing a deep dive and see what's really going on here with this team. I still believe in this Kings team, Donnie. I think there's tweaks they need to make. I think they could be a player in the trade market, but I think this team is better than where they're at right now. And people who are writing them off right now, I think it's a mistake. I'm not saying they're a championship contending team, but I think they are better than what we've seen so far in terms of them sitting as the 12th seed right now in the West.
Yeah, the West is just so weird. I expect them to rebound and have that normalize, like I just was saying, but looking at the West standings here, it's I don't really know what teams are gonna drop in, which ones are gonna come down, go up. I don't really know. This is all just kind of crazy. But it's kind of crazy seeing them 2 games below 500 and still being a positive in diff. That's kind of crazy too.
That's rare.
So that it's very hard to do that. So yeah, we'll see what happens with them. But I think regardless of how things finish, they are definitely better than they appear to be.
Agree 100%. All right, everybody, let us know in the comment section. What do you think about this narrative that you simply cannot win with DeMar DeRozan? And why does this persist, even though the numbers right now are telling us otherwise? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And go check out our latest video on Brandon Ingram, now lost for the foreseeable future to the New Orleans Pelicans. Oh boy, what are they going to do there? Go check that out right now.